everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for yet another edition of Succession Management and Institution Building on Amogate Radio Communications. On this first edition of the third month of the first quarter of 2024. My name is Tolu Omodara. It's a joy, it's a delight, it's a pleasure to have you with us on this maiden edition of the month. We hope you've had a good month thus far, and we hope your week is also off to a good start. So, last week, we looked at the issue of succession management and innovation, right, with respect to institutions. We dwelt on how institutions should be the reason for innovation rather than an inhibition to innovation. We confronted the myth, or we confronted the assumption, let me not say it's a myth, the assumption that institutions can be an inhibition to innovation, right, which we've been alluding to in the program thus far, because it is true that institutions, if not effectively managed, can actually constitute some form of inhibition to innovation, right? In other words, there is the risk of over-institutionalizing things, especially if it is not done with a mindset of succession and innovation, right? And we were saying that actually, rather than institutions inhibiting innovation, institutions can be the reason for innovation. Institutions can be the reason why you are not just neutral or moderate or average, but why your organization is actually flying high with respect to innovation, especially if you pull the lever of succession, right? We talked about usually the fact that founders have a certain mindset, right? They have a typical innovation mindset. Founders typically have an innovation mindset, a creation mindset, an invention mindset, which is the reason why they founded the organization to start with. Now, in order to consolidate what they have started, they need to move between innovation and institution. So what we're essentially saying is that to continue to go between, the cycle of institution to innovation, you need to have successors with an innovation mindset. I hope you're getting this. Let me try and play it down again. So you have founders who typically have an innovation mindset, which is why they established the organization in the first place. Now, because we do not just want to create, but we also want to have organizations that have staying power, right, which can be a description of institutions, you have to ensure that that which the founder has created is established, is institutionalized, right? Now, to guarantee a continuous innovation, right? A continuous improvement, a continuous creativity, right? To ensure that the mindset, the orientation that established the organization in the first instance is maintained, you have to ensure that successors with an innovation mindset are recruited and raised. So that was a critical point we're making last week, that innovation does not need to be institutionalized out, if I can use that expression. Innovation does not need to be, strangulated through institutions. As a matter of fact, with an innovation mindset or an innovation management mindset, right, we can ensure that innovation is instead strengthened through institutions. That was what we looked at last week, right? As a way of ensuring that institutionalization does not inhibit, but rather triggers innovation, we need to deploy succession effectively, raise successors with the same innovation mindset that bred the organization to start with. That way, the cycle continues. My name is still Tolu Omodara. It's a joy, it's a delight. It's a pleasure to have you with us on this edition of the program. And today we'll be going further from where we stopped last week, right? We highlighted something last week. We talked about performance managing top leadership for innovations, right? Performance managing top leadership in institutions for innovation, right? In other words, how do we, one of the pillars, one of the institutional pillars that we can use to ensure that institutions become the reason for innovation is performance management. How do we deploy performance management in a way that top leadership, triggers innovation, stimulates innovation, create an innovation-friendly climate. Remember, we talked about that last week, that culture is the shadow of the leader. And one of the responsibilities of top leadership is to create a culture, to create a climate that supports innovation, right? A climate where employees feel comfortable sharing ideas. In addition to the structure, we've referenced that before on this program, there's a need to have an innovation unit, that structure. Last week, we talked about things like job description, that actually elements of innovation management should be built into the job descriptions of senior management positions, of top leadership positions, of senior management positions, right? Especially when you want to entrench that innovation culture, when you want to institutionalize the innovation culture, right? Now, we want to talk about performance managing top leadership for innovation, for institutionalized innovation. I'll take that again. Performance managing top leadership for institutionalized innovation. How do we ensure that top leadership recognize that they will be managed, their performance will be managed, they'll be monitored, they'll be coached where necessary for innovation and innovation management, especially the top leaders in succession, because we are still looking at succession management and institution building. Now, as we talk about, let's look at performance management to start with, right? Performance management has been a theme that has been on for decades, right? It was said to have begun, I think, with the US Army at some point when, I think after the First World War, when they were saying soldiers to war, beg your pardon, and when they come back from war, they will review their performance and they would ensure that those who did best or performed best were promoted or were rewarded, and so on and so forth, right? And it has evolved over the decades, right? It has evolved from the time of World War I, continuously, to the time when there have been different, so to say, orientations with performance management, right? There has been a time when, I think according to the Harvard Business Review, there was a time when they had an evolution where, for instance, in the 1940s, about 60% of US companies were using appraisals to document workers' performance. In other words, at that point, the focus was on the appraisal. Then in the 1950s, it was said that Douglas McGregor argued for engaging employees in assessment and goal setting. So at that point, there was an evolution from appraisals to a more interactive goal setting process, because I for one believe that appraisal is after the fact. It's like you're waiting to quote and unquote catch the person in the wrong, right? And the focus is on what the person, if you're not careful, the focus can easily be on what the person has done wrong, right? So in this evolution, the social psychologist Douglas McGregor pushed for engaging employees, not just in assessment, but also in goal setting, which is before the fact. And this was about the 1950s. So you're not just waiting for them to get it wrong, but you're actually, beginning at the performance period. Quarterly is usually what we advocate for in Amogate. Some do it twice in a year, some do it once in a year, right? Whatever it is that works for you. The bottom line is that about the 1950s, the social psychologist McGregor pushed for a more proactive approach to performance management from what they had in the 1940s, which was basically about performance assessment, to what they now had in the 1950s, which was prior to the fact, right? Then in the 1960s, Jack Welch's General Electric now began to talk about, separating appraisals into evaluatory conversations, let me put it that way, but also to developmental conversations. I'll say that again. About the 1960s, General Electric began to, lead the way in developmental conversations, not just, performance conversations. So performance can be said to be an output, right? And there are certain inputs that feed performance. Somebody came to us recently in Amogate and said, we want us to talk about operational excellence. like they want to do some operational excellence trainings, and say, okay, beautiful, it's good to do some operational excellence trainings. However, we had to say to them that operational excellence is like an output. Certain things, coalesce, so to say. Certain things coagulate, so to say. Certain things come together to produce that outcome, right? To produce that output at the minimum, and hopefully it also becomes an outcome and not just an output. What am I saying? I'm saying that about the, I think, 1960s, General Electric began to lead the way in looking at the inputs that produce the output, right? So they began to canvas for developmental conversations, going into the performance management process, right? So remember what we said, they looked at the issue of initially just appraisals in the 40s. Then later in the 50s, 1950s, they began to look at goal setting. Then in 1960s, they began to also, organizations began to say, okay, let's also look at the development process, right? The development process. Now, I can go on and on about the the evolution of performance management, but this is what I want us to note. I won't take us through that journey. I want us to note that performance management itself is undergoing innovation, continuous innovation. That's one of the points I'm making, right? And as the performance management itself continually evolves, it is all because organizations realize that they cannot be static. Remember, the theme we're looking at today is performance managing top leadership for institutionalized innovation, right? And we're saying that, you see, a performance management process that would guarantee, continuous innovation itself must not be static. That's the point I'm making by referencing the Harvard Business Review article. You can read it up if you want. It's the performance management revolution. We have always been passionate about performance management in Amogate, and we have always been passionate about an innovative approach to performance management. I remember when we implemented performance management for an entire state judiciary in 2013, we were very atypical in our approach. We were very, so to say, creative in our approach. We're very, almost revolutionary at that point in our approach, as far back as 2013, because we realized that a lot of innovation rests on leadership, rests on top management, but that process has to be compelled, so to say, and take note of the word, compelled through performance management. Now, there is the part of performance management that is certainly about goal setting. Our one approach to performance management typically goes round the cycle. One, there has to be goal setting, very important. We talk about performance goal setting, then we talk about performance monitoring, then we talk about performance coaching, then we talk about performance appraisals. We've never believed in focusing on only performance appraisals. We often emphasize the performance goal setting that begins with strategic planning. We drive that a lot when we work with our clients. Your clear strategic goals lay the foundation for effective performance goal setting. When the overall organizational goals and strategies have not been well defined, then what is the basis for creating performance goals at the departmental, divisional, unit, and individual levels? So when you say you're performance managing, still follow me carefully. When you say you're performance managing top leadership for innovation, right? When you're, in other words, saying to top leaders, saying to also successor leaders, right? Leaders you're developing for succession, when you say to them that we are going to manage your performance, and one of the things we'll be looking for is how you drive innovation, how you create a culture of innovation, is all the things we're managing your performance for. As an organization yourself, right? When I say as an organization, of course, that's at the level of the board, at the level of the top level management, depending on the level at which you are managing. If you are overseeing the CEO, I'm speaking to the board here. If you are overseeing the top management, I'm speaking to the CEO. If you're managing the middle level management, I'm speaking to the top level managers, and so on and so forth, right? Depending on the level you are in, one of the things you want to ensure is that your performance management process itself is innovative. Your performance management process is responsive. An unresponsive performance management system cannot drive innovation. A less than creative performance management process cannot stimulate innovation. Institutions can be the reason why there is innovation in your organization rather than the reason why innovation is stagnated. We've established that last week. Now, this week, we are saying specifically that one of the institutional pillars, one of the institutional policies, right? Remember, institutions are made up of rules, they're made up of principles, they're made up of processes, they're made up of procedures. We've talked about that before. Now, one of those policies, procedures, right? One of the institutional pillars that you can use to drive innovation is performance management. That's one of the principles, one of the pillars, one of the policies, one of the processes. But a performance management process that will drive innovation in your organization cannot be less than innovative itself. For you to have a performance management process institutionalize innovation, for you to use a performance management process to stimulate innovation in your organization, then the performance management process itself must be undergoing continuous renewal, continuous improvement, continuous recreation, continuous reinvention. I hope this is making sense. My name remains Toluwamodara. This is Amoge Radio Communications. We are always glad to have you with us, and we are grateful for the opportunity to share this with you. Please follow us very carefully. This matters a lot to us, and we'll be back shortly. Okay, so let's continue. So we've established the fact that institutions can be the reason why there is innovation rather than be the reason why innovation is inhibited. We established that last week. This week, we are going on to a specific institutional pillar that we can use to drive innovation. And for today, we're looking at performance management. And that's why we talk about performance managing top leadership for institutionalizing innovation. In other words, how do we use performance management to ensure that top leaders use institutions to innovate, use institutions to stimulate innovation? And one of the points we are making, one of the foundational points, we're still going to continue with this with subsequent episodes, but one of the foundational points we are making in this start is that a performance management process, a performance management policy, a performance management philosophy, a performance management procedure that will drive innovation must itself be innovative, right? Now, we've kind of spoken a little bit to one of the performance management cycles that we use. There could be several, right? Some talk about balanced scorecard, there's so many things. The point for us is it must go through a cycle. The cycle begins with goal setting for us, very, very important. But that goal setting must begin with the overall strategic plan. The strategic plan is what is cascaded into several levels of performance goals. The overall organizational strategic plan is what you cascade into departmental goals, divisional goals, unit goals, and eventually individual goals, depending on what the structure and the levels of your organization are, right? So once you have the goal setting, there must also be the performance monitoring. Very, very, very important. And I want to believe this is part of what you need to require of leadership, right? When you are setting goals, let's begin a little with that. When you're setting goals, it's very important for top leaders who want to use this institutional pillar to drive innovation to ensure that they set innovation goals. One of the principles of goal setting is that you cannot get what you do not expect. I'll repeat that. One of the principles of goal setting is that you cannot get what you do not expect. Many times when you set goals, right, and you say we are, as an organization, we are aiming for this, sometimes it's as simple as you aim for the sky and fall on the mountain, or you aim for the mountain and you fall on the tree. In other words, because you have set that goal, typically you have kick-started a process. You have triggered something, right? People then begin to apply themselves. It's like when the president of America said, we're going to put a man on the moon, right? Because that goal has been set, all of a sudden, different parts of the nation begin to ask themselves, what do we need to do to get this done? What part do we need to play? So as an organization, when you set that strategic goal and we say, this is what we are aiming for. We are going to increase productivity by 20% this year. We are going to increase our customer base by 25% this year. We are going to fine-tune our excellence by X percentage this year. Because that goal has been set, you have basically kickstarted a process. So going back to how you use this institutional pillar to trigger innovation, right? If you don't build this into succession, right? If the successors, right, in the organization, if the top leadership does not, kickstart that process where those in the subsequent levels are required to innovate. If the for instance, if the CEO does not set this goal, right, for maybe the deputy CEOs who are being pipelined to take his or her position, or if the CIO, the chief information officer, does not set these goals for the assistant CIOs, and so on and so forth, who are being required or who are being pipelined to take over their positions, right? If these innovation goals are not required of them, are not built into their performance goals, you are simply not pipelining the organization for innovation. You are simply not using succession to trigger innovation. And I'm going to break this down a bit again. Like I said, we are not in a hurry. We're going to continue this in subsequent episodes. But let me break this down again. So remember what we said. Typically, those who create have an innovation mindset, which is why they created in the first instance. But they also want to maintain, right? And you then say, okay, I'm going to use institutions to establish. I'm going to use institutions to ensure that the organizations that we created have staying power. And sometimes it appears as if there's a conflict between the mindset that creates and the mindset that maintains. But we are saying not necessarily. If you pipeline innovation into succession, if you build innovation into succession, if you require innovation of successors, you can use that institutional pillar called performance management to guarantee continuous innovation in the institution. This institutional pillar is one of the ways through which you can use institutions to entrench and guarantee continuous innovation in your organization. But you must set it as part of the goals, as part of the performance goals. First of all, as part of the overall strategic goals, which are then cascaded into the performance goals. Very, very, very important. So remember that performance management cycle again. It begins with goal setting, then you now go to performance monitoring. But the first thing is to set the performance goals, especially for those that are being pipelined to step into some leadership positions. Very, very, of course, you can, and now don't get me wrong, you can decide, an organization can still decide to set innovation goals for every single person in the organization. It's not a bad idea, depending on what your strategic direction is, depending on what your priorities are as an organization, and so on and so forth. But especially for those you are pipelining for leadership, if you want to maintain an innovation mindset, if you want to use institutions to, consolidate on innovation, to expand on innovation, to guarantee continuous innovation, then it is important to ensure that you set performance goals, especially for successors who are being pipelined to step into leadership positions. This is still Amoge Radio Communications. This is Tolu Omodara. This is Succession Management and Institution Building. And today we are looking at performance managing top leadership, performance managing, especially those who are going to be, successors into several levels for institutionalized innovation. How do we ensure that we use performance management as a pillar to guarantee that there is continuous innovation in the institutions? We'll take just a little bit more and then we'll call it a wrap for today. Let's look a little bit at performance monitoring. I think we've sort of laid the foundation of performance goal setting. You set goals that have to do with innovation. You set them especially for those who are being pipelined for succession at different leadership levels. That way, leadership and institutions can continue to establish and drive innovation, right? And of course, your performance management process itself must remain innovative. You can't be stuck. I started by talking a little bit about the fact that performance management is a concept that has undergone an evolution. So it's not like, oh, this is how we always do performance management. And let's talk a little bit about performance monitoring, but let me allude to something quickly. Many times when organizations call us to say, come and train on balanced scorecard, we often tell them, what exactly do you want to train on? That's why many times when When we meet with you in Amogate, there's a lot we do. Every time we engage with you, there's a lot we do beyond, way beyond what you are paying us for. Many, many times when they say come and train, we more or less have to first go into a consulting mode before we start training. Because when you say you want to do a balanced scorecard, and that's not, we don't have anything against balanced scorecard, by the way, but that's just a framework that emphasizes certain themes. And so when you say you are using the balanced scorecard with those 4 themes in balanced scorecard framework, you are basically saying that's all you want to always focus on, but that's not what is required. That is not an innovative performance management approach. What is important is that you are continuously evaluating your strategies, evaluating the environment, evaluating your internal and external climate to determine the themes that are relevant per season. So performance goal setting must be based on performance managing for innovation itself must be based on an innovative performance management framework, right? You set those performance goals that are innovative, that are responsive, not the ones that are cast in stone and that are non-responsive because it is intellectually convenient. No, that is not going to work. You have to make sure that you have responsive performance management systems in order to be able to use performance management to drive continuous innovation in your institution. I'll quickly touch a little bit on what we'll be going deeper into next week, and then we'll call it a wrap so that we don't have too much to process today, right? So let's talk about performance monitoring for continuous innovation. It's one thing to set goals, it's another thing to ensure that goals are implemented. We've seen it a lot. Last week, I alluded to bridging the strategy performance gap, bridging the ideation implementation gap. Many, many, many times we've seen it again and again. Only a certain percentage and not a very significant percentage of goals that organizations set make it to the point of implementation. To be honest with you, one of the reasons is because of poor performance monitoring. I'm being honest with you. We've seen this again and again and again. So as important as strategic goal setting is, as important as performance goal setting is, as important as it is to build innovation into the performance goals, especially for successors, guess what? That is not going to suffice. It's not going to be sufficient. You now have to proceed from that to continuous performance monitoring for implementation of innovation, for implementation of the innovation goals that have been set. And this is one thing that we've seen again and again. It rests a lot with leadership. It rests a lot with management. You can't go to rest. You can't go to sleep. We've said it a lot on this program. Leadership is not for everyone. Because you as the leader, and when we say leader now, we're also talking about leaders in pipeline, those that are being raised to succeed as well. You are responsible for a certain degree of implementation. So if innovation goals have been set, the implementation of those innovation goals rests on you. It's not going to happen by itself. Those innovation goals are not going to implement themselves. The implementation of those innovation goals is not going to happen by itself. A lot of performance monitoring is required to ensure, to guarantee, to compel the implementation of innovation goals. And it's often not a walk in the park. Because remember, it is very, very critical to set goals, but as critical as it is and as demanding as goal setting can be, conceptualization, we've talked a lot about that, envisioning, right? As demanding as it can be, is just one part of the process. Another part of the process is the implementation of the goals that have been set. Extremely important. And one of the things you can use to ensure the implementation of those innovation goals using the performance management pillar, using the overall holistic performance management pillar, is the specific pie in the whole piece, a specific piece of the pie, which is performance monitoring. And that's another thing that you need to groom your successors for. Many of us that are leaders, part of the reasons why we've been effective as leaders is because we know how to monitor. We know how to performance monitor. We know how to set performance goals. We know how to set performance innovation goals, but we also know how to monitor the implementation of those innovation goals. We know how to require it. We know how to build it into performance conversations, continuous performance conversations. In Amogate, we always say to our clients, you don't wait till the end of the performance period to assess where the employee is. It's too late. You don't wait till and you also must train your successors to continuously monitor those goals. The Yoruba people of Southwest Africa, Southwest Nigeria, where I'm from, have a saying. They say, in other words, when you maintain continuous focus on something, it is likely to get done. Performance monitoring is another crucial piece of the performance management pie. You have to ensure continuous performance monitoring as a leader. Then you have to train your successors to understand the process of continuous performance monitoring, especially to ensure the implementation of innovation goals, to ensure the actualization of implementation goals, the continuous pursuit first of implementation goals, which will eventually lead to the implementation of implementation goals. I've never seen anything happen overnight. If you've ever been engaged with implementation of the birthing of ideas, you understand that there can be a distance between the performance goal settings and the performance implementation, or the strategic goal setting and implementation of the strategic goals, including innovation goals. And that is one thing you as a leader would have learned over time. And that's one thing you need to pass on to successors to ensure that innovation goals get implemented. Well, I think this is a note on which we would need to stop today. And next week, we're going to go deeper into performance monitoring, right? How do we performance monitor for implementation of innovation goals? Today, we've looked at performance management as a pillar, an institutional pillar, right? That can be used to ensure innovation in institutions, right? Institutions is about processes, about rules, about policies. Performance management is one of those things, right? And if you deploy it well, it can guarantee implementation of innovation goals. It can guarantee, first of all, that innovation goals are set and also that innovation goals are implemented. But there is a bridge in between the setting of innovation goals and the implementation of innovation goals. And that bridge is performance monitoring. And we'll spend more time on it next week. Well, for now, thank you very much again for doing this with us. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for listening to us. We really appreciate you being here. We look forward to receiving your feedback. It's very important to us. You are the reason we do this. We also look forward to working with you to implement these thoughts, these ideas, these processes, this innovation, procedures, these institutionalization processes. These are things we've done again and again and again and again, and we look forward to doing this with you. Until then, please follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, follow us on MixLR too, right? You can always go back to listen to some of these broadcasts as well. My name remains Tolu Omodere. We want you to think succession. We want you to think innovation. And now we also want you to think performance management also, especially performance goal setting, performance monitoring to ensure the implementation of institutional goals that will trigger rather than inhibit innovation. Thank you very much again. I'll be back same time, same station next week. Until then, have a good rest of the week and enjoy the month of March. Thank you.